Collaborative, conversation number 9. This is our last conversation of the 2021-2022 school year. Today, we're going to be looking back on our year, thinking about how our practices may have been impacted and how we've changed our middle level instruction. And then hopefully we'll end with some ideas and plans for next year. My name is Don Taylor. I teach sustainability at Main Street Middle School 5 through 8. And I'd like to thank the Middle Grades Collaborative, the Tarrant Institute of Innovative Education, and Up for Learning for supporting this work. Before we get into our conversation, I'd like to have our contributors introduce themselves. And thanks always for taking the time to join our conversation. Christy?
Hi, everybody. I'm Christy Howell, she, her pronouns, and I am a program associate at Up for Learning.
Hi, folks. My name is Meg O'Donnell. I teach 7-8 Humanities at Shelburne Community School.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kevin Pioli-Hunt. I teach 5-8 and on Swift House at Wilson Central School.
Hi, Maura Wheeler. I use she, her pronouns. I am the proficiency-based learning and technology integration coach for the Lamoille South School District.
All right, thanks everybody and welcome. So the first question, thinking back to September and the beginning of the school year, what were some of your hopes and aspirations for our return to in-person learning? And I guess just thinking about it now, what were some of the ideas or structures that you had seen either in remote learning or in pod learning from our sort of quote unquote COVID year that you had hoped maybe would, or maybe did continue into this year? So again, thinking back to September, what were some of your hopes and aspirations for our supposedly return to normal? And what were some of the things that you were hoping that came out of the great disruption that you were hoping to see? And did you see those? And we'll start with Christy.
So my perspective is a little different because I'm working with a lot of different schools through my role at Up for Learning. And I also just started at Up for Learning in August. So it was a very new year for me in lots of ways. I came from being a classroom teacher. So I would say universally what I was hearing from the students that I was working with and the teachers and the admin were just a lot of behavioral issues at the start of the year, a lot of just social emotional dysregulation happening at the beginning of the year as students re-entered and hadn't been in person in a long time. So that was hard and something we certainly were working with every school and with every team. It was something we had to acknowledge and talk about. I would say one silver lining from the pandemic has been our ability to work not only with schools in Vermont, but with schools in different states. We have a really strong connection with the school in Mississippi now, and with the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma, and with a school in Nepal. So there's been this sort of widening of our reach, which has been really cool to see and something that didn't exist before 2020. So some hard things and also some bright spots from the past 2 years. But again, I've only been there since August, so a lot of it has been new for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Christy. So cool. Very cool. I guess my hope and aspirations coming in September were just the opportunity to be together, to have kids in front of us as opposed to doing the dance of hybrid. And I was really looking forward to student collaboration. Kids weren't allowed to we weren't allowed to do much group work, obviously, last year. So that was something I was really excited about. And I also loved a few things that we have kept, which has been lots of, daily, twice a day we're outside, whether it's for our morning walk or for our snack time. And the pre-COVID, we hadn't been doing that. And so we do that every day, no matter what. And we love it. And now we're starting to see like the whole middle school on this walk. And so it's been actually kind of cool to see to see us do that on a community way, and it's fairly calm. It's not, we're not having to do, there's not a need for much behavior management at that time. It's early in the morning and sometimes it's chilly, so it's nice. And I guess in thinking about that group work piece, I think the thing that I did not anticipate or expect, I think the reality of it was just the lagging social skills that kids really needed time to be coached on. What does it mean to be a cooperative learning partner? What does it mean to regulate yourself so that you can be available for learning? And I still, we had hopes that we were gonna be allowed to have more of a flexible schedule coming into the school year, and that got changed like the third day of in-service, pre-service. And so unfortunately, our schedule doesn't reflect what we had hoped it would. So yeah, that's where we are.
I would echo a lot of what Meg just said. I think coming into this school year in September, like definitely was excited to get just in person again with rebuilding, some of the community and different traditions that we have established on team that helps build our community and just get kids together. And like Meg was saying, like having them actually be able to collaborate and work in small groups again, do some of these more engaging projects that we, typically ground ourselves in. And I think over the pandemic too, it was one of those, I know we all had these conversations where it's what an opportunity for the education system to change its whole model and thinking and in the hope that we're going to put more emphasis on making sure kids' basic needs are being met. And we're going to change the way that we're reaching out to families and connecting with families and making sure everybody has access to things that they need to be successful. Instead of just kind of going back into this same system that we've known. So that's been, I think one of those things where it is what it is for right now, but hopefully we can keep pushing for that to change. And then, yeah, just kind of, again, like connecting with something that Meg just said, we see a huge shift in our 7th and 8th graders in terms of their ability to, I'm trying to think like what the right way of saying it, but just like work together or just kind of be in a space together, like kind of under control and act in a civilized manner. And it's across our whole school. And I think it's across the whole state and the whole country. Like we've been really hearing, especially I think with like this age level where you can tell us as kids who just started getting access to technology and social media during the pandemic as potentially 6th graders. And then it's like, what are we going to do with our time? Like you're probably on a device and you're not interacting or getting any of this like social feedback from your behavior from peers or other people around you. And I feel like we've all been,
Pardon the interruption.
sorry,
We are now looking for Abby. Thank you.
Sorry about that. And I think we're all just kind of, scrambling and trying to really build in those social skills times. Like how are we reteaching kids just how to act and how to be respectful with one another and kind to one another. And it feels like that's been more of an uphill battle this year than we've ever had before. And we've put in so much work in terms of the community. And then there's all these unexpected decisions that are still happening. We're like, oh, come on. Like let's grab onto this stuff. So that's something that we're hoping we'll see, change over the years. Cause we had, our years now established with our 5th and 6th graders. And luckily we're on a 4-year team. So we're hoping that in a couple of years, we'll see that come back to center a little bit for us.
So I can really echo a lot of what Kevin and Meg have shared. I work at the district office year round, and we talk about these sort of like 2.5, 3 weeks that we had in July last year where our masks were off and we were doing a lot of our strategic planning and reflecting on the year and thinking about our hopes for the year. And this is like right as Delta started to kick off. And so we were not planning on having masks the beginning of the year and all those things. And so we think about those weeks and we talk about it all the time about like, our perspective then versus how we welcomed students into the building this year and teachers, and how, as Meg was saying, we came into in-service and it was like, so can all the kids be in the cafeteria, right? And then we had to think through the cafeteria, and they have to start in their classrooms, and can we do outside recess, and how do we, and it was another year where I think we had the hope of, and we had a lot of intention in June ending, thinking about like, what does a holistic start to the school year look like? How do we center, student voice and well-being? And then masks were on, and we were mixing classes, which felt really unsettling to some of our teachers. And it was really hard. It was a really hard start to the year. And I think, as Kevin was saying, we were also, in trying to build community, we were also noticing some real needs on the part of students, some of those social emotional needs, some dysregulation. It was really a lot for some of our students to be mixing with so many other students. It had been a really long time just being in proximity with so many other kids. And so we reached out to our good friends at Up for Learning, and we said we need some help. And so in November, we did some work really thinking about how do we integrate student voice into thinking about how to meet some of those needs. And then some really wonderful things stayed. So up at People's Academy High School, I go up and get my lunch every day, and they have a fire pit now outside that started from COVID for kids to take mask breaks. And they have student leaders who manage the fire and bring the firewood up and make sure students are safe. And it's this like beautiful scene, especially in the winter, of kids like huddled around a fire, and they have benches, and the kids really maintain the space. And when it's nice out, everyone's outside, and there's this new sort of like independence from students that I think when we grant it to them, they really rise to the occasion. And we've had to ask students to do that quite a bit through the past, 2-3 school years. I also think it's made us really think about intentionality in the classroom, both last year thinking about, like safety precautions, but this year really thinking about like, what are those routines? How do I set my expectations? How do I create intentional opportunities for students to work on some of those social skills? And so we've been really talking about that a lot at our middle level, and thinking about meeting the students' needs. And then I think that it's also, I'm seeing relationships being built between teachers and students in ways that I don't think would have happened previous, and like little routines and rituals that are happening in classrooms because of, first it was the pods, and now it's sort of like you still have your home base, or you're eating lunch with kids. And we just went back to the cafeteria a couple weeks ago, and but just like the calmness, like there is this calmness to the building around lunchtime, for example, which I don't think that we've had in the past. So lots of things. I feel like it's like this fog that some days it's really foggy, and some days it's like the sun is about to break through, but then the fog rolls in again the next morning. And that's, I think, just how we're like living this year. And I think the fog is lifting though. Like I feel very, very hopeful for next fall.
I can, connect with so much of what folks have said. For me, I think it was a little bit of a double whammy in that I moved from I had been 17 years in a humanities classroom, and I had taught in the pod. And my pod experience last year, I felt was really positive. And one of the reasons I felt it was way more laid back, we had dialed back a lot of the curriculum initiatives. We also had a soft opening, so kids could come in anywhere from 7:45 to 8:30. So there wasn't that frantic start to the day. And I really appreciated that. And I really, kids have said this too, that after being remote, or after, having different schedules, that coming in for 5 hours, was kind of like a nice bridge. And there's another challenge with this year, we're expecting kids to be in the classroom for 7 hours. And I've talked to kids and they've said it just feels too much. It feels like a burden they can't handle. And I'm wondering, how kids who went from like remote learning and totally independent to 2 hours to 5 hours and now to 7, how we've built structures and to support that. And that's a question that I continue to have. But so I went to a situation where I had been with kids for 2 years on a multi-age team, to a situation where I was with one class for the whole year, like every day, to a situation now where I teach now 5 through 8, and I have them for essentially quarters. So I have to like really work on relationships, and it's very, very difficult to do that in such a short amount of time. So I'm working on strategizing that. And I'll talk more about this later, but as Kevin mentioned too, I think what's happened with technology is something that's been really different. A couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, we were talking about how awesome certification programs were and independent learning, and how kids are using technology now, I think is fundamentally different than how they were using it before the pandemic. And I think that we still have not had time to really sit back and reflect on what that's like. And then I also heard this from folks, this intentionality, like going back and being intentional about things like organization or collaborative learning or those transferable skills, which I think have been lost a little bit. Like when we pared down our curriculum during the pandemic, I think we really started focusing on academic skills, and to the detriment of some of these other skills that are equally as important, social, organizational, or otherwise. And I think that's been something I've really noticed. And then there's also this idea of kids being together in large groups and not having experience like that. And so we're getting 7th and 8th graders who you would expect to be one way and are a different way. And I'm not sure exactly what's gone into that. And I see some of that reflected in their language to each other, and also the way that the level of patience that they demonstrate with each other, and the level of empathy that they have. And so that's something that I'm also thinking about sort of on a regular basis. And then Maura, I think, talked about relationships, rituals, and routines. And before the call started, I was talking with Kevin about some of the traditional things that teams have done. And in the past 3 years, from remote learning to pod or hybrid, and then return to in-person, I think a lot of these rituals and traditions have been overturned or have gone away. And I think there's a lot of kids who are not happy about that, and who are carrying that in a little bit of a bitter way. So for example, at our school, they usually have an end of the year trip to Canada, and that hasn't happened in 2 or 3 years now. And I know that kids have remarked on that pretty regularly. And so how do you build back those traditions, those routines and rituals, so that kids can, that there was always that thing when kids came through my classroom of, oh, my sibling did this and I'm so excited for that. And or you could point to something on the wall, an artifact. Yeah, I remember when this, and I think we've lost a little bit of that. So how to build that back into our curriculum, I think, is going to be really, really important. Joe Rivers has joined us also. Joe, hello. And we're just kind of talking about what we expected and what are the things that we've noticed at the start of the school year. The next question I have for the group, is, what is something, as you look at your practice, and we may have touched on this already, but as you look at your practice, or you look at things you do with kids, learning activities, etc., what are some of the changes that you've had to make over the course of this school year? And, are those reflective of middle level best practice or organization or personalized learning? And why did you make those changes? And, how has it turned out? And so that's a question I'm going to throw out there. And I'll start with Christy again, and then I'll add Joe to the rotation. Christy?
Yeah, again, just expressing my newness to the organization. But something I've been really impressed with at UP is the relationship building that we do with teams. Like we always prioritize relationship building with any team we work with. So we don't just dive into the work and start, talking about strengths and concerns and all of that. We really spend time doing activities, connections, questions, circles to get to know students. And I think that's just made such a difference in doing this kind of work. I was just thinking today, I was at Hunt Middle School in the North End here in Burlington, and I've been working with that team now like every 2 weeks since December or January, and I feel like I know them so well. And we really just spend 45 minutes together. But over that time, we've built in a lot of relationship building and trust. And yeah, just thinking about like, even though I'm not with them every day, just that our focus at UP around that relationship building has been so huge. And I think if I ever return to the classroom as a teaching capacity, I'm really going to take a lot of the activities and the lessons that I've learned from UP back with me.
Thanks, Christy. I need more training in how to do circles, but we have used it here on team once a week on Wednesdays. We have this flexible schedule a little bit, and I just had one yesterday because there was some harm done on our team, and it was just such an important reminder about when you bring that to kids, they want to fix it. Something I'm seeing that's sort of interesting is this really intense loyalty that they have to each other, to at some point to a degree that is makes it difficult for them to take responsibility for things that happen on the team. They don't want to throw their friends under the bus or anything like that, which I understand. But we had just a really powerful conversation, and I didn't really want to do it. I didn't want to have the conversation yesterday. I was tired. I was like, and I'm so glad that I did. So the important reminder to me, I guess, is establishing those routines so that you can. So if you have the routine in your classroom, then you can lean on that, right? Like that's something that's available. So I don't want to lose that, but I do feel like I need a little more training around it. Something I've also noticed is like, I think, Don, you already mentioned it, but I just find that I do spend so much more time planning my lessons. I find that I don't want to leave much up to, not chance, because I love the organic nature of things and how they evolve, but I just am finding that I focus on really try to create high engaging tasks and that require kids to work with one another, and that I am really being intentional about building those relationship skills in the curriculum of whatever it is I'm doing. So I'm just trying to hold space for both what is it that I want kids to do academically, and how can I make this engaging and have them learn more about themselves and one another. And so it's a little exhausting right now, but those are some things I'm just trying to be intentional about, I guess.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback on some of that, and just going back to something you had mentioned before, Don. Just this whole piece of having to be way more just explicit in terms of expectations on how kids interact, I think has been something that was a realization for me this year, is that we haven't really, we always do our expectations and how are we, developing our culture and whatnot, but I feel like we have to be so scripted in terms of what's school appropriate and how we should be talking to each other in this space. And we have to give so many more reminders about that. And the sad thing that we're starting to see is the talks we used to have with some 8th graders, many years ago. Now we're having those conversations with the 8th, the 7th, and some of the 6th graders. And it's it's scary, to hear some of the things that clearly our 10, 11-year-olds have been exposed to, that they're repeating at school. And it's disheartening at times, and just makes me realize how important this job is to make sure that we're wrapping around them and giving them the right tools in school to recognize that their words carry a large impact, whether or not their intent was to harm somebody, that their words can definitely do that. And it's just like, we were just talking about today at lunch that being really intentional. I think just being really transparent about some of the moves that we make as teachers and why we're doing advisories and why we're doing some of the things we're doing to build relationships, because it's starting to feel at times where, we get this like quick feedback, oh, you just don't like me. And kids will say that if they don't get what they want when they want. It's like, well, we're holding you to an expectation, or where it's like, I don't think it was that expected to say, hey, can you just close your Chromebook while we're trying to talk? Like, oh, you're just picking on me. Like, why don't you like me? It's like, that seems like a pretty reasonable request right now. We're just trying to have a conversation. And it's like the fact that so many of them go right to that, you don't like me, and it's always coinciding with, you're not letting me do what I want to do when I want to do it. It's, again, I think it just comes back to that year and a half, 2 years that we've just gone through in terms of connections with people and getting that regular feedback face to face. So it's something that we're continuing to struggle with, continuing to work on. I think, some things that we definitely changed in our schedule that we had control over was making sure, we did more advisories. Typically our team would always do 3, we used to call them morning meetings, which were the same as advisory, and 2 Kiva times, which is our whole team together in our Kiva space. And this year we're like, we need more of that kind of intimate advisory time. So we did 4 of those a week and 1 Kiva time, just to give us that time to really develop those relationships with our core classes. And then academically, I've just, and Meg, going back to what you were just talking about, I felt like I've been doing more of prep in a different way, just because I've really been trying to ramp up like differentiating pace over anything. So I feel like just after coming off of this, being remote and trying to, you were kind of getting kids at different levels, and we were able to do these different Google Meets at different times and launch different lessons that we had recorded, and like in real time, like trying to get people at their own pace that they're ready for. So we're not, we're pushing our kids who are ready to be pushed, and we're bringing up our kids who need a little extra support. So that's something I've been really focused on this year in terms of like, how can I have the pace differentiated throughout all my different lessons that we're doing.
Hi. How are things different? Today, right at the end of the day, I was working with an 8th grade student in May, and I was praising her for her ability to do what typically, or in the past, a beginning 7th grader was able to accomplish in class with reading comprehension work around nonfiction. And so that's a big change for us, that the breadth of skills, there's way more of a disparity than previously, or maybe I'm just more aware of it now. But that's a big deal. 173 came into play just as COVID came in, and expectations are really different around how to meet most needs of most students in tier 1 classes, and then what do the supports look like around that. A lot of conversation began a couple years ago, and expectations have changed, but at least where I am, there hasn't been any follow through. But the law is the law. And so that's something that probably needs to be addressed, and needs to be addressed systemically. I think academic expectations, behaviorally, things are really different. And again, as students are pushed in, options around how to address behavior have changed. And that's a continuing concern that I don't have an answer to. But those are things that have evolved over the last couple of years. Behavioral issues have increased, and the disparity of skills are also on the upcrease, up something. And we're trying to address it, but those things are hard. And in our leadership meeting this morning, it was talked about pretty clearly that it feels like we're expected to do everything. And that's, all these laws that have been passed and all these expectations that ask us to be on our A game all the time are really challenging. And it would be great if we were able to prioritize things a little bit. And right now, it doesn't seem like there's clarity around prioritizing what matters the most. And so we're struggling, I'm struggling.
Thanks, Joe. I've just written down about 20 different things from what people have said. And I'd say that the biggest change for me that happened across the year, again, I moved into it's called a specials class. And so we're teaching sustainability. And at the beginning of the year, I'd say it was probably 65 to 70%. We were kind of doing some academic stuff and learned about the UN SDGs. And then 30% of it was sort of some project-based learning. Like Meg, we started community walks last year. And I think I'd started those on day one. So I think we've done almost 36 weeks of community walks through all sorts of weather. And kids really enjoy that. You do have to actually instruct them about some of the expectations for walking, which, was a surprise. But we've gotten better, which is good. But I would say that right now, I would say that I'm 90% or even more of project-based learning. And that was something, feedback of kids just said, we want to do hands-on stuff. We don't want to look at computers anymore. And in my new job, I have a set of kitchens. I have 2 rooms and I have kitchens in the back because the FCS, the Family Consumer Science program, was a little bit of a victim. It was a victim of the pandemic. And so what we've done is we've just started using those kitchens. We signed up with the King Arthur Flour Bake for Good program. We've been baking on a regular basis and taking at least half of what we turn out over to a food pantry here. I've had kids deliver that. And so I just call it feeling good, doing good. And that's been the focus. We've also been doing a lot. We did a little bit of fiber arts with some wool work and some embroidery. And as I've been going through this, it's my first year and I'm like, we just got to do project. Now I'm stepping back and saying, okay, what's the really good curriculum that's going to support all this work? So for example, I just found Johns Hopkins Center for Sustainable Living. They have unbelievable resources and lesson plans, dialed right into your age group. And that's been fantastic. And so that's what we've been doing. I mean, we've been taking food that was supposed to be composted. We've turned that into muffins and cakes and cookies. We've been giving that, we're using food that was going to be composted, and we've been giving that to they're having dances. So we're making all the snacks for that. We're giving that away. We also had a sugaring unit this year with the help from a local community member. We had a Sugar Woods that was a short walk up the hill. We ended up making more than 5 gallons of syrup. And so now we're using the syrup to make maple cookies that the kids are then taking over to the food pantry and feeding people. And I've just found that food and those kind of activities bring a lot of kids together. And you can also say, look, these are my expectations for behavior. If you want to have this project-based learning, I need you to meet these expectations. And it works really, really well. And I'd actually say that the last 2 weeks have probably been some of the most kind of inspiring for me. I think that's been really important. And the other thing that's been happening is I think we've gone far away from student voice and choice, or because of whatever remote learning or how the pandemic has worked. And so I've been working with Upper Learning for 2 years and cultivating pathways to sustainability. And so now we have a steering committee that's been meeting on a regular basis all year, and they're kind of helping to guide the program. And that's a mix of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And last week we had another student, a junior in high school from Harwood, come over and give a leadership workshop. And they've actually established a class at Harwood. Kids developed a class at Harwood about leadership. And so next year, I asked our kids if they would like to develop that leadership component within the steering committee, and they're full on board on that, so that our steering committee will then be also tapped with developing leadership curriculum and ideas that will filter out to my classes. So that could include things like 8th graders mentoring 5th graders as we're doing these projects. It could also include 8th grade, those leaders communicating what we're doing across the school. And that's where I kind of see how I went full bore into the project-based learning, and now I'm backfilling it up with leadership, with student opportunities for increased engagement, communication, etc. And I think that's been the biggest change. And that's something that I'm going to reflect hard on as I move into the summer and think about my practice and what I need to do for next year. And that kind of leads to sort of the last question of the evening is, what are your hopes or plans or the things that you're really going to focus on? I know that I've talked to so many teachers who are just like, I'm done. I need to take like 8 weeks of doing nothing. But I do think, if you're a teacher and you care about, the practice, you'll be thinking about and reflecting on your practice. So what are you looking to change or to start off next year with, or something that you learned this year and you want to really integrate into your practice? Maura, we'll start with you.
I'd love to start us off. I am shifting roles in the fall. So I'm going to be the principal at Stoll Elementary School next year. But something that I've been thinking a lot about, and we've been doing some pretty intentional work here around, is thinking about how we support teachers in moving the work forward, and really trying to consider how do we do it in a sustainable way. So thinking about utilizing teaming structures, or having a small group come together to do sort of like initial drafting of work, and how do we use feedback and like already structured opportunities to get everyone to like have their input in ways that we maybe haven't in the past. And so in my new role, I really want to think about how because I think when I think about the demands on teachers right now, it's the other things. It's like, can you stay late to help this club? Can't, it's all the other like, oh, we need someone to do this, the recess, and we don't have a sub in this room, and it's all these extra pieces. And so being really intentional about how do we make sure that it's sustainable, and that we're constantly getting feedback and working on people's strengths. So, are there volunteers? Are there people who want to do this? So that's one thing. And then the other thing, I'm just really looking forward to working directly with youth. I have been at the district level, so I've been a little removed from youth, but really thinking about how to utilize youth voice in decision making, and making some shifts there. So those would be sort of two things for me.
We're shifting to a new batch of young folks coming in. And so we're starting to look at the data of what we have coming. And I'm concerned and starting to try to work through the numbers that we're seeing associated with the students coming in around academic performance. 60% of our students are below by a fair amount in math, and 50% are below in literacy. Those are issues that mean that I probably have to look at my practice and how I collaborate with my colleagues in order to try to help move those folks in a positive direction. And so that's my summer really is trying to get my head around that and trying to remain in touch with the folks that I work with so that we can plan this out together. Very concrete and but it's impactful too.
Yeah, I think having been at Up, since August, and now I'm starting to see some of the projects that we started back in the fall kind of come to an end and come to fruition. So I feel like I've learned a ton just watching that cycle and continuing to focus on like so much of what we've been talking about has just been like general, like a lot of schools just want to work on like kindness to each other and like feeling safe in the bathrooms and like real like basic stuff. Like bathrooms have come up as such a like repeated theme, like students just hanging out in there and like intimidating other students and like not great stuff. But yeah, just I think so much of the work we're doing is that like foundational and pandemic related or not, just like building on foundational relationships with each other between students and between students and adults. So yeah, continuing to focus on that. We're also like, we're expanding a lot this year at Up. We've hired a couple new folks, and I think we might be hiring another program associate in the summer. So we're growing a lot and we're taking on a lot more schools. So I think this summer will be a lot of thinking about how we're not spreading ourselves too thin, but really doing the work as best we can wherever we are. So we're going to be doing a lot of sort of strategizing around that. But I'm excited to sort of spend the summer planning. And then we also have some summer institutes that we're working with here in Burlington, a racial justice institute for students. And yeah, a couple of good things happening this summer. But reach out if you're interested in working with us.
Yeah, one thing I think we're really looking forward to changing or doing more of, which is funny because we were forced to do more of it last year, is get outside more. And like, I really want to dabble more with just outdoor education and outdoor experience, just growing that appreciation for the outdoors and with nature. I've caught myself a couple times this year, like I kind of got back in the rut of the system and the schedule and the routine of being inside in the classroom. I'm like, man, sun's out, like, let's get outside. So I want to, make that both a time just to be outside and appreciate the time outside, but also like, how are we taking advantage and doing some more educating outside and making connections with the nature that we have. I mean, we're in such an amazing state here to do that type of work. So that's one thing I definitely want to take advantage of. And I think those community walks would be a great place to start. So I appreciate all that feedback and hearing, the successes that other people have had with those.
I just submitted on Tuesday my National Board recertification, which is always a little scary. And I think what was interesting about it is that it forced reflection in the midst of chaos, which normally we don't do, right? We save that for when we have space. So I'm looking for some continued like time to reflect and sit back and get some distance. But some things have come up that I really want to advocate for our young teachers. I'm concerned that there's an exodus of young teachers that just feel not supported. And Kate Rookie, who was one of our guests, I don't think she'll mind me saying this, but it's exciting. She's going to go teach over in Hong Kong, which is super cool. But and then, so I just know that there's that it's just it's a hard time to start, and it was a hard time to start in education in the pandemic. So I'm really thinking about that. Like, I'd like to figure out ways to support new teachers. And I also am really mindful of supporting middle level. I attended our school board meeting the other night, and it was frankly pretty concerning that there's some folks that still don't quite know the difference between junior high and middle level. And I think in our vacuum that's maybe being created because we're so tapped, that things are going to shift under our feet without our attention. And so I want to just continue to think about what that looks like, advocacy. And I guess just I found that when you step away from something, what's important rises up, right? Whatever, there's a good metaphor in there somewhere. I can't figure out what it is, but I know that the things will rise up for what we want to focus on next year as a team. And there's a lot of changes here at Shelburne in our leadership and some in our structure in our or at least our colleagues that we're working with. And so I'm really wanting us to focus on what we know is best practice for kids. And I know that will rise up. I'm hoping.
There's a lot. I kind of want to ask Meg about the recertification because I'm supposed to do that next year too. But we'll get to that. I think, I don't know, for me, one of the things that I think Kevin mentioned earlier was about language we're hearing from students. And I really always look at language as a barometer. And I always look at please and thank you as a barometer too of where we are. And I think when you're getting the language that you don't want to hear and you're not getting the please and thank you, and I don't know if that's an outdated expectation or not. I'm just sorry about that, but just maybe basic being sort of empathetic and kind and, gracious when people are doing something for you. Maybe that's something we need to work on. I also, as I mentioned, really want to make sure that the curriculum I have supporting projects is really up to speed. And I think one thing that I've missed this year is students creating media. So we have these kids creating all these projects, working with all sorts of outside organizations. So one of my goals next year is to have kids creating the media, social and otherwise, that's positive, that speaks to what we're doing and is a communication tool from our kids and our program out to the community and to families. And speaking of which, that's another element. I want to get better at communicating with families. Again, I'm a special teacher now, so I don't see kids consistently throughout the year, but I think it's important for me to be communicating effectively with families to make sure that they're on board and understand what we're doing. And then we've talked a lot about going out in the community, and I'd like to work a little bit harder on bringing the community into the classroom by having adults come in and talk about their jobs and talk about what they're doing and how that relates to sustainability in any way. I think kids always benefit when they hear from other adults. And I think that's also something that may have been missing during the pandemic, is their ability to interact with caring adults in many different venues and situations. And then technically, I guess one of the things that I've been working on is choice menus. I know that choice menus are, especially with what we're doing, one kid will end their project at this level and then another kid's still working. So how can you create engaging choice menus that are meaningful to kids, that both extend the learning and are also differentiated so that all kids can have access to them? And that includes, I think, appealing to the gaming side of what kids are doing. I think there's a lot of opportunities, even board games that are available that, and this is kind of an aside, but I do have a UN SDG board game, and I've had kids play that game a number of times, and that's a great unstructured social time for kids to work within a set of boundaries and with expectations of gameplay. And that's a great way of developing social skills. That's just something that I've observed. And then probably the last piece and the biggest piece is I'm not sure why there's been a de-emphasis on the personalized learning, but from what I'm doing, it's so important and it could be so effective. We have these kids are doing all sorts of projects. As I mentioned, we had kids who were going up in the woods, they were tapping trees, they were collecting sap, they were doing the boiling, then they were processing and finishing and bottling. Each of those stages can be, evidence of growth and learning. It can be a place where kids can be writing about it, where kids can be reflecting on it. And there's also a lot of local history, as Joe knows, there's a ton of local history and culture about that can be clearly tied to what's happening in our future in terms of climate change and the environment. And so building those connections in a personalized way, emphasizing the PLP, especially because I'm seeing kids 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So having them collect evidence through each year so that by the time they're 8th graders, they can look at their growth over time is something that I believe is going to be really important. And one of the skills I mentioned before, like organizational skills, etc. I think that we need to go back to having kids set some goals too. And, working on the goal setting, whether it be a daily goal, a weekly goal, a semester goal, whatever the case may be, if it's modifying behavior to meet expectations, if it's, reaching out into the community, whatever that would look like, I think that's something that we need to maybe kind of revisit as being important. So I think that about wraps it up. Does anybody have any final comments? I know that Maura, I think, is it okay if I share? I think Maura in her new position may not be able to join us. We're hoping that she will be periodically, but it's been 7 years of this group together. And I deeply appreciate everything that everybody brings to the table. Maura, we're going to miss your grace and kindness and forgiving people who forget you in the rotation, etc. But I so appreciate your professionalism and your positive attitude. And, it's been 7 years, longer than that, at the Middle Grades Collaborative. And you've been a tremendous professional and colleague and friend all along the way. And I deeply appreciate everything that you brought to us. I know you're not going far away, so we'll stop in and visit. I'll bring my kids to go sledding. I think you have a really good sledding hill behind Stowe Elementary.
We have an awesome sledding hill, a good playground. We're right in the village. Stop by anytime. Yeah.
My kids are doing a hockey camp there in the summer, so I'll knock on your door and see if you're actually working. But
the window, we're on the first window to the left of the front door, so knock anytime.
Well, I have one kid who'd take you up on that in a heartbeat. So thank you, everybody, for everything that you've done. I know it's been an incredible year. I look forward to, I talked to James at the Middle Grades Collaborative. We're setting up for an 8th year. So I look forward to setting that up. I look forward to seeing you all again. And I hope you have an amazing end to the school year and a tremendous summer. You've all deserved it, and I appreciate it. Congratulations, Kevin, and congratulations, Meg, for getting your applications in. Congratulations, Maura, on your new job. And thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Joe. And thanks, Christy. We'll take care. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.